Jason, when somebody actually texts off a yard sign, you're telling me that you have a number of automations that comes back to them in terms of like videos and things of that nature?
Yeah, we're using a system called Call Action. And so basically when somebody will reach out to me off of the yard signs, we have like a text campaign that's going to automatically go out. We're going to send them information and pictures on the property. Also, if we have video marketing or any 3D tours, we're going to include that in the text campaign as well.
That's awesome. So not only do they get an automatic, I'm imagining text response with information about the property, whether it be like an info sheet, pictures, if you have a video, that'll automatically go out as well. And what are you finding, I guess, prior to automating that, what was the process like for you?
Well, before I had the whole call action set up, it's like most agents, you just have like your cell phone number on the yard sign. The only problem that we were running into with that is, somebody calls you off the yard sign, you don't really know where they're calling you from when you see the call come in. And so a lot of the times you would, end up missing the phone call and maybe not calling them back because, you get so many calls, you're not sure where this call came from. And there's times where, the agents won't call the missed calls back. And so, what we would do is have to, screen all the calls. We would have to make sure to reach out to everyone that we missed. And then we would have to manually, send them all the information that they requested. And so now, we have a sign writer that says, text for info, or, we could replace it with, text for 3D tour. And now it's all automatic. So, no running back to the computer to try to remember like who it was you spoke to. I used to run into the problem, like someone would call me when I was driving or something. I'd have a conversation with them, and it's hard to like capture their information when you're like driving or out in the field. And so it was always difficult to kind of like remember all the details. And so now another thing with Call Action is all the calls, the inbound calls are recorded and transcribed. So it's just eliminates so much work that we were doing manually.
It sounds like you have also figured out a way, because you mentioned previously that you're using a third-party application, Call Action, to help automate the phone call. So not only do you have writers that say like, hey, text this information, and this automatic sequence comes in. If people call in, can you talk to a little bit about how you've utilized technology to automate that portion of the business?
So with a company like Call Action and with a technology like this, you can track where every single call is coming from. So it also helps when the phone call comes in, because, sometimes we get a phone call and we're maybe in the middle of something and we're like, oh, I'm gonna have to call this person back. But if you have a lead source that is a very strong lead source, man, when that lead source calls, you're going to go out of your way to answer. So like for me, it's like Yelp and Google calls. Those are usually like, come list me's. They're very ready to go. And so when I get a call from one of those lead sources, like whatever I'm doing, I'm going to make an extra effort to answer it. I could go back to the office. I can, listen to that conversation again. I could read the transcription. And another cool thing about it is when the call comes in is the system is going to try to pull as much public info as it can off of that phone number. So there's times that I get the person's name, I get maybe even their home address, I get, family members. There's a lot of information that's attached to the people's phone numbers.
Before you kind of go, because we're talking about a lot at one time, I want to make sure people can conceptually understand like how this is working. So it's texting automations on yard signs. Mm-hmm. So that way, you're giving them all the information, it'll increase the probability that they'll interact with you in some capacity. The second is automating on those phone calls. So when they come in, not only can you see the source of where they're calling from, but they're also transcribing that conversation, which makes your job easier. So I don't have to figure out, kind of who I talked to and what they were kind of asking about and what property they called about. And then the third form of automation is in both of those interactions with consumers. The system that you set up allows you to capture data and then put that into your CRM, something like Follow Up Boss. Is that right?
Exactly.
And why is that important, Jason? I think I'm pretty clear on why it's important, but can you share to the audience why that whole sequence is becoming increasingly more important?
Well, the main reason why it's so important to automatically add all inbound calls and all that information to our CRM is because most agents aren't going to get around to doing it. Okay, so they're having conversations on their regular cell phone with their regular cell phone number, which most businesses don't work off of your personal cell, which is it's huge to have like a business line. And so what was happening in the past is you have all these people that call and you never get around to adding them to your database. You got a desk full of little notes that you've written, Post-it notes everywhere. And so being able to automate that process not only helps you save time, but it helps you be more efficient.
I would propose or suggest, Jason, that moving in the future, agents who don't have a system like this set up will not be able to compete because they're not going to be able to provide the service, the speed, the efficiency that consumers are actually that's what their expectation is. Would you agree with that?
Well, look at Amazon, right? Like if I push the button and my package don't show up in 24 hours, I'm furious, right? And like you said, these companies making these consumer expectations, gone are the days, in my opinion, especially now with like ChatGPT, where you don't have the skills in place to act fast, get back to them on a timely basis. Most of the things that we use these days are instant gratification. The number one complaint I usually hear in this industry is, my agent never got back to me. He listed my house. I never heard from him again. They don't have systems in place to provide that type of service. The client's going to get a certain type of service, like even if I forget about them.
I think that's important for agents to begin thinking about because, Naval Ravikant says, if you want to get paid in the future, you need to live in the future. So if in the future,
Nice.
People's expectations are that instant kind of interaction, you give me all the information very quickly, and the system that you've set up in terms of automation allows you to be able to deliver that, then if I want to continue to get my unfair share in the future, I have to do that now. I think every business is accruing debt. And it's either financial debt, management debt, or technical debt. And with what we're talking about, this is like a technical debt thing, meaning like if I don't take the time to figure this stuff out or partner with somebody or learn from somebody like you or, whatever, then what's happened is I'm going to accrue, if I don't learn that skill set, I accrue technical debt in my business, which debt ultimately has to be paid at some point. You have to go back and like figure it out. So what would you say to those agents that are like, oh, because me and you hear that shit all the time. They're like, oh, I'm not really techie. It's not like my thing. Like,
well, I actually say this a lot, and I got it from you. It's you had that analogy that you guys did at your retreat where you have them swim laps and then they put on like fatigues and then they swim laps again. And the point of it was you need to eliminate the drag. So figure out where the drag is, where what's keeping you from, putting these automations in place, and you need to eliminate the drag. So whatever you don't know how to do, you need to hire someone that knows how to do it, or you need to make it a point to learn it. I mean, half of the stuff that I've learned when it comes to like my computer techie stuff, I always make the joke is, I learned it from YouTube University. You could learn anything on YouTube. So you could learn how to do all of this stuff step by step. I was just telling you, I built a server and all this stuff. I didn't know how to do none of that. I didn't go to school for that. I learned it on YouTube.
If you spend 50 hours studying something, you will know more than like 95% of the population on that particular topic. So,
right.
It's like an hour a day.
Would it break down to 18 minutes a day?
Something silly, right? So, yeah, you can either study it or you can get it done for you. And the done for you version is where you kind of pay somebody. And I'm also imagining too, with each one of these, it's like one of these might be a rock Meaning like, okay, I'm going to set up automations with the texts, and maybe I'm going to take the next 90 days to figure this shit out. So I'm either going to watch YouTube videos, I'm going to reach out to Jason, I'm going to do whatever I need to do to get that really plugged in. And then once you do that, then it's like, okay, let's do automations with the calls. All right, cool. How do I need to learn how to do that? And maybe that's your kind of next quarter rock. Like, did you put all this together like that, or was it like over time?
I spent like 2-3 weeks, like just focusing on my Yelp profile and focusing on how to make it better and, making it 100% complete. That's the way I typically am, is when I get something new, it's like, I'm like totally absorbed by it for that month or whatever, or for those few weeks. So it's going to take a while.
Yeah. And I hear from a lot of agents, they're like, well, like I don't really have time to mess with that because they're so focused on, kind of transactions and stuff, which I totally understand. At the same time, I would propose that they can't afford not to, because again, if you want to get paid in the future, you need to live in the future. And this is the setup that is going to be required. So if we are competing with super well funded, like super deep pocket tech companies, the way for us to continue to be able to compete is for us to have similar type system set up for ourselves, right? So versus like, okay, let's say prior to you having the system set up, somebody would call in, you'd be in the car, okay, and then you have to remember who they were and all this other stuff, and so much leakage, so much stuff slips through the cracks. Whereas now, what I want to go back to is you were saying like when these calls come in, they also automatically are put into follow-up plus your CRM. So there's like, anybody who's reaching out to you is being put into the CRM so that way they can be followed up with. Is that right?
Yeah, every single phone call that I receive automatically goes straight into the CRM, and it goes into like my new leads smart list. And I mean, everybody, I even have like, marketing people, spam. That's unfortunate. They do have some spam blockers they just installed. But every phone call goes straight into my CRM with the name that's attached to their phone number, with their phone number. When I get back to the computer, I just got to go into like my lead bucket, and, you can see everyone that has called you recently. And then you go into there, you can also see just at a glance what the conversation was about.
That's dope. I love that. So, but that makes now you're behaving like these big tech companies. Now you have a system to where you're capturing all this data, and then you can go and do lead follow-up or prospect or do what needs to be done. But without this system, it's so wildly inefficient. One of the other things you've done, you've also automated gifting. So talk a little bit about that.
I use a company called EvaBot. I've been using them for years. It's really cool. It's basically, as soon as it's done, I set that action plan, and an email goes out to the client asking them to, hey, my name is Eva. I'm Jason's, gifting assistant. Please click this link so that, I can ask you some questions and get your order. One cool thing that I really, really like is like if it's a seller, it automatically gets their forwarding address. The bot is going to ask them a series of questions so that it can customize a gift for them. It wants to know, like, do they like coffee or do they like tea? Do they have any allergies? Do they like alcohol? Do they have a pet? So it's going to ask them all this information, which is another cool thing about it because it's like an intake form. I can export all this information to my CRM, and these are questions that I'm not always asking the client, right? And so it takes all this information that it asks them, and it's going to put together a custom gift. It's going to be in a branded box. And so when the box shows up at their house, on the outside of the box, like Amazon has a big Amazon logo. Well, when my box shows up, it has, our branding, our logo on it. They open up the box and there's a handwritten card. So they also do like the fake computer generated handwritten cards. And, it's filled with, I don't know what that stuff's called, that stuffing stuff. And it has custom gifts, depending on how much that I've specified. I have a set amount.
It's able to send the customizable gifts based on the survey. And I'm imagining that you're not involved at all in the selection process of what gifts. It's EvaBot that's doing it.
All I did was set them a sold action plan, buyer sold. I assigned that action plan, and I just basically can forget about them for about a year.
I'm aware that in order to have a good relationship with others, you have to have a good relationship with yourself first. So there's some key components to this. One is an imaginary continuum. You are feeling anxious, like hurried, rushed, hands up to protect yourself from an attack, breathing shallow and quickly, like are you being chased by a tiger? No. Are you under some sort of like serious, like could die? No. It's self-induced. Now on the other end of the continuum is you feeling hands loosely, like spotlight of awareness, firmly rooted in the present moment. It can go out into the world into one direction to create, to produce, to love, and to enjoy. You are placing yourself somewhere on this imaginary continuum, whether it's conscious or unconscious. What's also true is something might happen that moves me towards the uptight end of the continuum. So what would be an example of something happening moving me towards the uptight end of the continuum? Yeah, deal falls apart.
Girl on a horse.
Girl on a, yeah. That's a different, yeah. What else could happen moves me to the uptight end of the continuum?
Bad review.
Bad review. Some people lose sleep over that shit, freak out over it. Yep. What else could move me to the uptight end? Somebody quits.
Fight with a family.
Fight with a family member. So all of these things can move us towards the uptight end of the continuum. Here's the interesting part. How long I choose to stay there is entirely up to me. And if I exacerbate it or make it worse. So how could I exacerbate it or make it worse? So something happens externally. So let's say you get a shitty review. So you go into the world of mind, and who do you typically meet in the world of mind?
Gremlin.
Your gremlin, right? And your gremlin is your gremlin based on his or her intention. His or her intention is to pull you out of direct experience, this present moment called now, pull you into the world of mind and to keep you there for as long as possible, because in doing so, you're missing out on your own life as it unfolding in front of you. Everything's going, you wake up in the morning, did your affirmations, you fucking ate a good breakfast, saw the sunrise, you're like, today's gonna be fucking fantastic. You wake up, check your email, fucking 1-star review. Then you start to go like this towards which end of the continuum? Shitty. And you start to tense up, freeze up, and as you're going, what's happening up here? You're up in the world of mind, and what's your gremlin telling you?
It's telling me that everyone's gonna fucking see this. Okay. Yeah, I'm the worst agent in the world. No one will ever want to work with me.
Yes, and watch me.
I'll never make any more money in my life, and I'll end up broke alone.
So look at what just happened. I went from, everything's cool, man, this is great. Something happens. I start to, unconsciously, without me being aware, I'm starting to move towards the uptight end of the continuum. I go into the world of mind, my grandma starts to say all this stuff to me, and before I know it, in a minute, in an instant, I am crunched up, and it all happens like that. Now, I was completely unaware that I had any input in this process, that I had any control over this process in some form or fashion. And keeping in mind that uptight is a literal term. Up means up in the world of mind. So there's 3 different realms of awareness. The first realm of awareness is our surroundings. So if we practice this, like, okay, what I want you guys to do right now is to become aware of light and shadows in the room. Have that be your focus. Good. Now what I want you to do is shift your awareness to the sound of the air conditioning. Notice how before you weren't even aware of it, now it's super loud. So what we're doing here is we're playing with our awareness. And we can shine it in 3 different areas. One was your physical, external, like your immediate environment. Things you can pick up with your sensory receptors, sight, sounds, things in your visual field. The second realm of awareness is what's going on internally. Breathing, sensations, feelings. So let's play with that for a second. Just go ahead and close your eyes for a moment. Drop your awareness inward. And like really check in, do like a body scan. Notice the path of your breath as it comes in, slides in front of that beautiful, pure, uncontaminated heart of hearts of yours in the center of your chest, fills up your belly, and slides right back behind your heart of hearts on the way out. Notice any tension you may feel in your body, if any at all, maybe in your face or your jaws or your forehead. And there's no struggling here, there's no straining, there's nothing for you to figure out, nothing for you to analyze, nothing for you to accomplish. All that's required is some effort. And that effort is for you to guide your spotlight of awareness where you want it to be, which at this moment is on what's going on inside. And keep in mind, guys, there's no right or wrong way to do this. Whatever you're doing is perfect. Now take that spotlight of awareness of yours, which again is firmly rooted in the present moment called now, which you have the ability to control and shine moment to moment, breath to breath. And at this moment, shift it from your body now to your face. Simply noticing any tension that may be present in your face, maybe in your jaws or in your forehead. Now you may notice as we're doing this, as we're playing with our spotlight of awareness, it may want to drift away and go someplace else. Maybe it's drifting away to noises that you're hearing. Maybe it drifts away up into the world of mind, thinking about something you have to do. It's perfectly okay. It's normal, it's natural, it's like rain and sunshine. If and when you notice that, just gently and purposefully and intentionally guide your spotlight of awareness back to where you want it to be, which at this moment is on your face. Noticing the area around your eyes and your eyelids, and particularly your eyes and the weight of your eyelids against your eyes. Take your spotlight of awareness, which again is firmly rooted in the present moment called now, which you have the ability to control and shine where you want it to be, and shift it into the world of mind, and just simply notice what's going on there. And as you go up into the world of mind, remember that your mind belongs to you, you do not belong to it. It's a tool for you to use and to manage. Now take that spotlight of awareness of yours, which again is rooted in the present moment called now, which you have the ability to control and shine where you want it to be, moment to moment and breath to breath, and shift that awareness now back to your face, specifically the area around your eyes and your eyelids, noticing the weight of your eyelids against your eyes. And when you're ready, there's no rush, but when you're ready, just go ahead and open your eyes up. This ability to be able to intentionally and purposefully guide our spotlight of awareness where we want it to be is directly correlated with you being really connected with what's true for you, right? You being able to be centered and clear and to check in with yourself. I've also found it's exceptionally helpful with deploying EQ in communication with people. Because there's two components to this relationship game. One is the relationship that you have with yourself. The second is we live on a planet in which we interact with other humans. Everything that we have, everything that you have at this moment has been touched by human hands. Everything comes to us through other humans, so we have to interact with other humans, and with other humans comes conflict or miscommunication, things of that nature. But where it begins is it begins with my relationship with myself, and this is a critical component of that, because all the way up to those 100 deals, and what it was creating in my body, because I was doing what Greg was doing, but just doing it every single day. And then what's a yummy, delicious byproduct of that is that level of awareness helps you to be able to connect with people at a higher level, because you can notice things as they're coming up. Yeah, so my ability to be able to deploy that is directly correlated with what we just did, is to be as centered and clear as possible, so that way I can notice things as they're coming up. And then I can share what's true for me as it's coming up. So there's this really interesting misconception. So the misconception that we have is that things happen, and then I have my response or my reaction to those things that happened. And that's how 95% of the population lives their life, right? And so they're constantly doing what? Blaming others, external circumstances, blah, 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 as though others are responsible for where they are in the imaginary continuum. Whose responsibility is where you are in the imaginary continuum? It's mine, bro. So what's actually true is that there's a step in between. Events occur, my response or my reaction, but there's a step in between. The step in between is my opinions or my judgment. So something takes place, I have an opinion or a judgment about what's happening, then I have a response or a reaction. Okay? So if this is accurate, so let's play this out. So something happens, let's say you get a shitty review. And I think, okay, I just respond or I react to that, but what's happening in this step? What's my opinion or my judgment? I'm never gonna get another thing, all this shit's gonna fuck up, blah, blah, blah. And then I have my response or my reaction. What's causing the pain is actually my opinion or my judgment. It's not, right, this is what's causing it. And what's interesting about that is, do you have control over that? Yeah. That's fascinating. But we have, as humans, we have the power, we have this unbelievable kind of divine power, which is to give things meaning. And that meaning can either be empowering or it can be disempowering, right? So in the Bible it says, life and death is in the tongue, so I can either build something up with words or I can tear it down with words. But they're saying the same thing. It's right here. It's my opinion or my judgment about what's taking place, not the actual event itself. So what if I told you, your beliefs don't make you a free thinker. The ability to change your beliefs based on new information is what makes you a free thinker. My ability to change my beliefs based on new information. Remember, a belief is just an opinion that you've developed loyalty to over time. It doesn't make it, it's just a belief. It's just an opinion. Usually when I'm over here, what came to the surface is like, yeah, it's the story that I'm telling myself or what my gremlin's telling me that's causing me to be over here. To me, that's jamming your own thumb in your own eye. So let's say you came to me and you were like, hey, my eye hurts. Kirill says, hey, my eye hurts, man. I'm like, okay. I sit him on a couch and we can talk about why he jams his own thumb in his own eye. Like maybe he came from a long line of eye jabbers. Maybe he wanted to suck his thumb as a kid and somebody fucking spanked him, so he came up with a piss poor alternative, which was to jam it in his own eye. Like, that could be interesting, and it could be even insightful. Far less effective and efficient, though, if I can help you to simply notice that it's your fucking thumb that you're jamming in your own eye. Because when you begin to notice that it's your thumb that you're jamming in your own eye, the observer, the witnesser, the watcher, the one who learned how to walk and talk without any instruction, the one who has a body but doesn't answer to their body, the one who has a name, Kiro, but isn't like, the one who has a body but is not their body, the one who has answers to a name but is not their name, the one who has thoughts but is not the thoughts, the observer, right? So if I asked you to reflect on when you were 7, your body was completely different, but the awareness was there. So the observer, the one who's witnessing and watching this whole thing go down, when you showed that one that it's your own thumb that you're jamming in your own eye, a natural correction takes place. And that's what Rick calls the Zen theory of change, which is that I free myself not by trying, right, to free myself. I don't get out of jail by bending the bars, gnashing my teeth, or blowing it up. I free myself by simply noticing how I am imprisoning myself in the very moment in which I'm doing it. So I had already been studying with Rick for like, I don't know, 6 or 7 years. And he's like, hey, there's usually 5 ways, not always, the majority of the time, 5 ways that people jam their own thumb in their own eye. Here are the 5 ways, okay? The first one is you scare yourself. Okay, scare the shit out of yourself, telling yourself a catastrophic story about something that's going to happen in the future. Now, my gremlin's particular brand of magic was that, right? Deploy that on a regular basis. Like, no more. I started to keep a gremlin taming journal. You know what every fucking entry in that journal was? About listings. There's not enough. I've only taken 4. What the fuck? I'm gonna end up broken alone by myself. Like, it was the same fucking thing I'm telling you. For those of you guys, next time we're on a call, I'll show you. I'll pull out I have journals fucking filled with entries. Like filled, complete journals filled with entries where if I read them out loud to you, it's the same reoccurring theme. And that was interesting to me because I noticed a pattern. Remember we talked about recognizing patterns? It was the same pattern. And what it's about is underneath is like the need for security, right? It was a very strong one. But we scare the shit out of ourselves. And what we do is we go up into the world of mind. It's like there's a movie theater. We go up in the world of mind. It's an empty movie theater. We sit down. Our gremlin sits right next to us and is like, hey, John, here's a really shitty movie. Let's watch it together. And you're like, no. He's like, no, it's fucking great. Yeah, here's some popcorn. And you're like, okay. And you sit there and you watch this fucking shitty movie about terrible, catastrophic things happening in the future that almost invariably never happen. But think about what that does. Anybody besides me ever watch a scary movie and their heart rate started beating faster? 100%. It's a fucking movie, but it's like boop, 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 boop. Like you get into fight or flight response. The same thing happens internally. If we're watching that terrible shitty movie in the future, it's flooding our system in the same way, right? So that's the first way that we do it. The second way we do it, and I see this so much in our industry and in our game, is we put ourselves down. And the primary way we do that is by comparing ourselves to other people. Well, fuck, like Mark, he just figured out that probate shit and he's just like crushing it, man. I'm not doing that. Fuck. Or you know what, Greg, he made $317,000 on a flip. Like, I wish I could do that. Or fucking Jose with his social shit. We're just comparing ourselves to other people and we put ourselves down, right? Which again is a form of eye jabbing. So we scare the shit out of ourselves. We put ourselves down by comparing ourselves to other people. We get mired in regret. Okay, mired in regret. And this is, I should have said it this way. I should have done this. I should have done that. And what you end up doing is shooting all over yourself. The fourth one is I cling to resentment. Like, you know what? Fucking this person didn't choose me as their coach or their sponsor. And I'm going to continue to be uptight and pissed off until they say they're sorry. Where the Buddha said like however many years ago that resentment is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. And then this fifth one is you trap yourself in a concept of the way that you think you are supposed to be. right? Of like what I feel like I should be doing. So I'll give you an example. Like I was doing a piece of work with this woman, she's a hard charging agent, and she said something on a call to me. She was like, you know, I'm the kind of woman that believes I should cook for my husband every night. Meanwhile, she's trying to do like 70 deals a year, okay? And I was like, that's interesting. Now, whenever anybody says I'm the kind of, or I always, or I never, what are they doing right in front of you? 100%, brother. They're hypnotizing themselves. Out of an infinity of possibilities and choices, they're telling themselves one thing. If they said that out loud to you, they said it in their head millions of times. They're just hypnotizing themselves right in front of you. So I was like, okay, well, where did you get that idea? And she stopped and thought about it. She's like, well, my mom. I was like, okay. So walk me through that, like what happens? But she was like, no, but I do enjoy like cooking and stuff. Like it's part of my love language, like I like it. I said, okay, well, let's walk through it. Let's imagine for a moment, I had her close her eyes. Let's imagine for a moment, you get home from a full day. You prospected, you did all the work, you did all that stuff, and you're tired. And now you're walking into the kitchen. Like, are you physically somewhere where you can walk into your kitchen? She's like, yep. I'm like, all right, walk in. And imagine you have this thing, this thing on your backpack. I have to do this. I have to cook a meal. So she starts to walk around. I'm like, okay, make your breathing shallow and quick, like create lots of tension internally. What am I helping her to do? Move herself to the uptight end of the continuum, and showing the observer that she has control over doing that. And she doesn't realize that. I don't need to tell her that because the observer gets it. So doing this, I said, what are you noticing? She's like, oh man, I'm getting lots of tension. Like my breathing's starting to get in quick. And I'm like, all right, what is your grandma telling you? Like, you have to do this. You have to do this. So I actually had her say it out loud. So walk around your kitchen, scrunched up. I have to do this. I have to make a meal. I have to make a meal. I have to make a meal. Fuck, I gotta make a meal. Gotta make it do this. Oh. And then I had her do that for like a minute or two. And I asked her a question. Tell me this, what are you afraid of? I'm afraid that if I don't make the meal, he'll just have a can of tuna fish. And I'm like, okay. And what are you afraid will happen then? She's like, well, if he can just eat a can of tuna fish and he's happy with it, what does he need me for? I was like, you're giving a lot of meaning to a can of tuna fish. Right? It's a tremendous amount of meaning that you're giving to that can of tuna fish, right? And then what ended up happening is she's like, so what this is about, it's about taking what you like and leaving what you don't.
When you're calling like expireds and cancels, you shouldn't even be looking at the price. You should be looking for the motivation.
Gosh, like, do I knock on doors? Is that something that we would do?
You're going to be considered pushy or rude by some people. You're going to find people who genuinely need you. And other realtors failed them. I'm a single mother of twins, and time is not a luxury for me. I have two people who depend on me, and I'm all they have. So when you leave that house, you make sure it's worth your time.
Welcome back, Novello Nation, to another episode of the Aaron Novello podcast. We have with us an absolute rock star. I've had the good fortune of coaching her for a good period of time now. I've watched her do something amazing, which is move to a brand new marketplace, start over from scratch where she doesn't know a soul. And within one calendar year was doing 52 transactions, about 15 million in volume. This calendar year on track to do about 100 transactions, 30 million in volume. The pride and joy of Dallas, Texas, Mrs. Jessica Nelson. I appreciate you taking the time to be with us here today.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, my pleasure. And, you know, I'm really thoughtful and purposeful about, you know, who we invite, because we want to make sure that they add lots of value. And I know that you can based on your experience. So I guess I'm curious, you know, you had a complete life over in Hoboken and we're just doing your thing and, you know, owned a few properties, had some rentals. And you had this very interesting idea during COVID to say, you know what, I think I'm going to move halfway across the country and start over from scratch. So talk to the audience a little bit about like what prompted that move and what was the thought process behind it, particularly when there was it was during a time where there was like a lot of uncertainty and required like a really huge amount of courage to make that move.
Yeah. So in August of 2020, most people were still, you know, they were staying home. They were trying to see what was going to happen. And for the most part, people were living in fear, right? So I took the opportunity to say, where can I grow? What can I do to take this time and really blow it up and do something amazing? So I've been in Hoboken raising my children there, and that's a city environment. it's a great place. I'm not saying it's not, but I felt like there was something else for me. And I said, I want to take my kids out to the country. Where can I go and make a huge difference? And I considered a few different places, but for some reason, Texas just, it stole my heart. And from the minute we landed here on, I think it was August 14th. No, it was my father's birthday. It was August 12th. I said, this is going to be where we move. And so I saw about 10 homes. I picked one. I bought it in 14 days. I sold all 4 of the properties that I owned in New Jersey. And I packed up 2 kids, 2 dogs, and I moved all of us in 14 days from New Jersey to Texas.
Yeah, it's pretty unbelievable. And, I'm aware that, you're doing that, on your own without other people there to help you or assist you in any way. So I guess talk to the audience a little bit about, from a mental perspective, because that's a lot to do at one time. And to also, start over in a brand new marketplace where you don't know a soul. I think that for a lot of people is very uncertain for them.
Mm-hmm.
So it would prevent them from doing something like that. So from a mindset perspective, what was kind of the thought process and what were some of the conversations that we had to continue to kind of solidify that mindset, that starting over from scratch, how strong it needs to be?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So we talked a lot about what do you start? What do you do? What do you physically do to create your first transaction, as if I was brand new in the industry again? And it's really humbling to do that because, if you've been in the industry for 10 years, or if you have other agents that look up to you, it's kind of cool to start brand new and, kind of experience what they experience. You learn a brand new market, you learn the trends of that market. So we talked a lot about, staying focused on the goal, staying focused on contacts, contracts, and previewing property, and really just getting to know this community and how I could serve it. Yeah,
I love that. I'm taking notes here because I remember those conversations we had. And do you remember how they are? Because one of the things I really appreciate about you is that, you're exceptionally coachable, and you also are not opposed to straightforward, candid conversations, because we've had some very straightforward, candid conversations, and you're receptive to it. And it's part of what allows you to produce the outcomes that you do, because you don't shy away from those types of conversations. But we had this conversation about attention and where to pay attention. And there were other people trying to tell you where to pay attention and what you should be doing.
Mm-hmm.
And I had a pretty kind of straightforward, direct response to that. So talk a little bit about what activities were you focused on in a completely brand new marketplace where you do not know a soul, like you have no database, you have no people to fall back on, sort of thing. You don't know anybody, that we focused on and basically said everything else is not important, and these are the things that are going to be important.
Yeah, so it's really simple. You ready?
Yeah.
When do you plan on moving?
Love that.
And just let the conversation start. I mean, some people, you don't have to be that direct. Listen, people are in the South, they don't really appreciate that. So, you want to preface it a little bit different. Oh, hi, my name is such and such. What's yours? Maybe you're in line waiting to pick up your kids at school. Maybe you're going to the gym. All of us do these activities where you meet people every day, no matter how busy you are, guys. And it's very simple to start up a conversation that leads to something having to do with their real estate. Even people will give you hints too, right? If someone's if you ask them how they're doing, they seem a little down, you might find out that there's maybe some trouble in their marriage, or, some reason why they might need to move. But if you don't talk to people and ask them questions, you won't find out how you can serve them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that. And we had a number that you were focused on, in terms of contacts, right? Because we're aware that, as a salesperson, our job is to be in the presence of prospects. And just to remember that, I think that's part of your competitive advantage, because you're very clear on that while other people aren't. So talk to us a little bit about what your focus was numbers wise and the methodologies that you use. Because I know you weren't just doing one methodology, you were doing multiple methods to get to that number.
Absolutely. So we had an issue with speed to result, right? So for us, what we talked about was talking to 50 people a day and getting to appointments and getting from appointments to contracts to negotiation to close, because I didn't have a lot of time.
Yeah.
So under normal conditions, you probably don't need to talk to that many people. You need to have better quality conversations, because they may not move today, but they'll move in a year. And now you add them to your database. They know you, et cetera, et cetera. I didn't have that time. I needed to produce money immediately. So I had to quickly find out who was going to move in the next 30 days and be on those people until they either listed with me or just, died. I don't know.
Yeah, or told you to like, go fly a kite. And
Yeah.
what is interesting is that understanding and that sense of urgency. I don't think people approach things with that level of urgency. My experience is that there's different levels of importance. One is like, it's not important at all. Two is important. And what's interesting about important is, I'm sure you're like me, if there's something that's important, it's important, but it may not get done for a little bit. But then there's an emergency. And an emergency is you drop everything that you're doing right now.
Exactly.
Right. And what I'm aware of is that we were very clear that producing income was an emergency. It's not something like, oh, I'll get to it sort of thing. It's like, nope, it is the most important thing. Not only were you calling, I'm aware you would send me pictures of you knocking on doors, right? I think you lost one of your earrings knocking on doors and you kept going like you didn't even care. So it's just, I think that level of urgency is something that, people aren't clear about. Is that right?
Oh, absolutely. You're going to be considered pushy or rude by some people, but what's going to happen is you're going to find people who genuinely need you, like either another realtor's failed them or they tried to do it on their own and they just couldn't. And when they meet you and you're quote unquote pushy, which is actually just being direct and aggressive, you are a breath of fresh air to them. They are so happy to meet you in your urgency because now they trust that you're going to get this done because they see how badly you want to get it done.
Yeah. So
that kind of became my superpower. So guys, I had this mentality, like, think of if somebody you love the most in the world. Think right now, like if you close your eyes, who do you love the most in the world that if they weren't here, you wouldn't know what to do with yourself? Now think that you need to raise X amount of money to get them some sort of surgery. That's how you need to work when you start in a new business.
Agreed, 100%. And what I wrote down as you're saying this is, motivated buyers and sellers love motivated agents. It's the people that are 6, 7s and 8 or 5, 6, 7s and motivations, on that kind of scale. They're not 8, 9s and 10s. They're not interested in that. And they'll be like, it's pushy. But people that are super motivated, very much so, are interested in somebody that's motivated to help them. So first you'll
see it in your reviews. Like people will write reviews that you're like, this is actually pretty funny.
Yeah. And I love that. And I think when you're doing it, what's interesting is that reviews are a reflection, I think, of your values, because you'll notice that they'll start to show up the same. They'll be like, hey, she was really professional, or hey, she was very proactive and assertive, or hey, she helped me get top dollar, or hey, right? You'll see a theme. You see them show up.
I've had a number of clients that say to me, go do your Jersey thing. and I know when they say that, I'm like, oh, they believe in me.
Yeah, they know. They're just labeling it that. So we talked about, again, kind of breaking into the brand new market. You don't know a soul. First, it's very clear, if I'm hearing you correctly, to understand the urgency, and what's really important is the production of income. And the way you're going to do that is by being in the presence of prospects, particularly in someplace new. You're going to ramp up the amount of people that you're talking to because you don't know anybody, and that will lead to opportunities. And now we get to the conversion piece. And what was interesting, right, is at the beginning, even though you're super powerful and you knew how to generate, you were a little, right, kind of going on the appointments. You're like, maybe I should have somebody come with me because I don't really know the marketplace that well. And then I'm aware that we had a real straightforward conversation about that. And then that stopped, right? So talk a little bit about, even though you were very clear on the attraction piece, being in a brand new market, like you didn't really know it that well, right? So even then it created like a little bit of doubt for you, like, I don't know, maybe I need somebody with me sort of thing. And then how you overcame that.
Wow, that's a powerful question. So that's self-confidence. That whole thing is a security blanket, which you enjoy pointing out. everyone has security blankets. Even the most powerful people have strange, weird things that they do that are their teddy bears. And you kind of have to acknowledge it. It's like, I guess, AA, right? You have to admit you have a problem, and then you have to face that problem. And then you have to have a plan around, when I'm doing this, how do I defeat that? You know, what self-talk do you have? What meditation? What books are you reading? You know, what is your program to defeat that behavior that's extremely limiting?
Yeah, I'm just writing stuff down as we're talking because it's all coming back. It's all coming up to me, like all the conversations we would have. So there's a couple things that I wrote down. Is you're mentioning, and I appreciate your authenticity, because people will see you and be like, oh, like it must have been like easy peasy 1, 2, 3 easy. It's like, well, what happened is we were producing and we were generating and we're getting in the presence of prospects, and then opportunities would present themselves. And then it was like, you were a little uncertain because it was new, right? You don't know the marketplace really well. And I remember, having that conversation with you in a very straightforward way. And this is one of the things that I wrote down, is that, we all have that, myself included. The question is who do you have in your life, or who do you have proximity with, that you give permission to point that out to you, right? Because even though it's very uncomfortable, if somebody doesn't point it out to you, it's really comfortable to stay under the warm little fuzzy blanket, right?
Mm-hmm.
At the same time, I won't kind of grow and expand from that. And you did. I remember I pointed it out to you. I'm like, look, you don't, like, those people need you more than you need them. Like, you're doing the hard work by generating the lead. You already know how to present. You just need to, study up on the marketplace. And then you did a hard stop to that. That stopped immediately. And then you started going on appointments on your own. And then as you kept doing that, that internal kind of trust built up. And then, you were off to the races. Is that right?
That's correct. It's so important. It was so important to me that in this first year, I had to make a huge splash, because you're unknown. So you have a good new agent's going to do 10 transactions or 15 transactions, and they're going to get Rookie of the Year. And that's great for them. But if you really want to take market share and you're trying to be a disruptor, you have to do something that is 10x to what everyone else is doing to get people talking. And that becomes your brand, your numbers, your production. You don't need to make cute videos. You don't need to dress inappropriately, ladies. You just need your numbers to speak for themselves.
That's just the price to pay for making a lot of money. I totally reject that. And I'm about to fire you. Why am I paying you? I want to give you a different perspective on financial margin. And so there is a deep emotional attachment to this trade of time for money. I'm going to trade my time for money until I get to this age, until I get to this income level. How do we create financial margin without actually having to trade more time for money? Number one, tax planning. Number two, proper structure. Maybe you do have passive income, but are you certain that you own it in the right way? The third is making sure you actually own the right assets. Don't be certain that you do. There's 4 kinds of assets: paper assets, hard assets, business assets, and then commodities. That's it. All assets. Now cryptocurrency is sort of a 5th asset, but that's it. Paper assets, hard assets, business assets, commodities, and then we'll give a nod to cryptocurrencies. That's it. And so my question is, are you certain that you own the right assets?
You didn't say cash as an asset.
No, I love a hedge fund manager who was on TV the other day. He said, cash is trash. But it's there is a perceived safety and security in it. Perceived. Because I can tell you, stock market was down 20, cash was down 15 last year. You said, well, my bank account didn't change. Yeah, but inflation did.
Purchasing power did. Most people don't realize that every currency that has ever been created has gone down to zero. Every single one in human history. So we think that we can avoid risk, but you can't avoid risk. You just get to choose the risk that you'd like to take. Now, where did you get the idea that having cash in the bank is safe? You didn't come up with that yourself. You weren't running around the Dominican Republic at 5 years old being like, I should put cash in the bank. No. Who taught it to you? Oh, gosh. So you're walking around with an old mental map, right?
That's really good.
of something that's not actually true. So even though it brings us internal tension and pain if we feel like we let go of assets, right? Or let go of money, it's actually, you're switching currency. I'm exchanging this paper currency, which eventually is going to go down to zero, for an asset that produces income or that, appreciates in value or something. Your cash does not appreciate in value. My dad, 30 years ago, could live a nice middle-class life on $50,000 a year. Now, he has to shrink his life dramatically to be able to continue to afford things because he's making the same amount of money. It has 30% less purchasing power. Does that make sense? The only way you can keep up with inflation is to own the right assets.
Do you ever review insurance policies with clients to make sure that they have the proper coverage, or do you know somebody that is a specialist at reviewing policies? Just like if you're owning a decent amount of rentals, just to make sure that you have the proper coverage for.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Do you do it personally, or do you guys?
Yeah, again, as somebody who owns 10 rentals myself, being really familiar with that space. I think what's interesting too, and I'll just press into something real quick, is own the right stuff. The wealthy families know life insurance, as an example, is one of the best asset classes. It's not insurance. It's insurance for poor people. Insurance is to pay for an event that's catastrophic: death, disability, flood, car accident. And listen, I have insurance. I have all kinds of insurance. Those are risk management tools for me.
Yeah, they're hedges.
Mm-hmm.
So they're really.
Yep. But then there's insurance as an asset class. There is no other asset class other than potentially a Roth IRA or Roth 401k that you can have indefinite and unlimited tax-free federal and state income.
Yeah, so to your point, you live in a state, like not only are you a high income earner, but you also live in a state that has a very high tax bracket. Whole life. So what he was explaining to me, because that's one of the things he suggested to me, and initially that's different. So it's pulling against the current. So, and he feels it from me, but he's kind and generous and doesn't point it out to me like, hey, bro, knock that off. But I'll be like, I don't know. It seems like, right? But as he's showing me, he's like, you can produce a residual stream of income that is tax-free federally and state in 50 states in the United States. So if I decide to pick up and move, because now I have portable streams of income, I don't want to live in Florida anymore, you can, and that stream of income will still be tax-free.
For the rest of your life.
For the rest of your life.
Let me engage for a second on the cash conversation. I read a fantastic book by a gentleman. It's called Living Fearless, and it is his name is Jamie Winship. He was a hired hand by the CIA for several decades to go into foreign territory and black sites to help CIA operatives work through their fears on the ground. That's his background, right? He has an Orthodox Christian perspective on it, but here's what he said that changed my life. He said, fears are things that are developed because of trauma events. And let's engage with that for a second. Something, and I don't mean to call you out at all, something happened in your childhood that made you fear not having enough money. And those are real events. So here's what we do. Rather than engaging with that trauma event in a way where we don't let it define us, don't let it shape us, and work through it, we actually lean into an identity that we feel like gives us safety from that fear. And so he talks about in the book, our whole life is a series of fear-based decisions, leaning away from the things we've learned to fear. And now we're left as people in our 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, making all of our decisions based off of fear. And I can tell you the two areas of life where those decisions are most prominent is health and wealth. It's the two things that are generally most precious to people, their health and their finances. They make fear-based decisions in those areas all the freaking time.
So true.
Instead of taking money and investing in a 401k where you get a tax deduction and then it grows tax deferred, and then the government controls when you take it out. Just so you know, there is $32 trillion right now in IRAs and 401ks. Wow. That's never been taxed. If the Senate finance committee asked what I thought, and they haven't, but if they did, I have a $13 million tax revenue generator right now. Hey, guess what? Everybody has an IRA 401k. You got to distribute it over the next 36 months.
Yeah.
And by the way, that's not law. That's the IRS writing a stroke of a pen, and that's changed. Done.
The other thing I think to consider too is with everything that's going on in the country, what's the probability that taxes will go up dramatically high when we can't, like, we're at the point where, like, you know, Medicare, Medicaid are insolvent, like all this other shit. Bro, it used to be, we don't realize this, 50, 60 years ago, the highest tax bracket was like 92%. If you got over a certain amount, almost all of the money that they kept.
Yeah, it's under JFK.
Yeah, and that wasn't that long ago. So if you made, like, let's say you made 400 grand, everything after that, 92% they kept. So we operate under, okay, just because something is true now, we do like resulting, because it's true now means it's always going to be true. No, that can change. And the probability that can change is super high. So the question is do I want assets that will be subject to that changing, right? Because they want to now, I've seen these things on CNN where they're trying to pass you having to pay capital gains tax on gains you haven't even fucking taken.
Which is
That's unbelievable. That's ridiculous, right? But we don't have control of that. So if I'm in different asset classes, you know, so this is part of the thinking with regards to, like, paying attention. We collectively hallucinate because it's this way now. It means it's always going to be there. That's not true.
Yeah. And again, let's go back to the top of the order. We're talking about financial margin, which I suggest is not about making more money. Tax planning, owning or having stuff in the right structure and owning the right assets is what can create and distance you from the social contract that exists of time for money. Now, what you choose to do with that time, who cares? Whatever's important to you.
I'm also, there becomes a new thing. Because when you disassociate your worth as a human from what you're doing, we were talking, like, as you go to a new mountaintop, the oxygen gets less. It's like rarefied air, and it might take you a little bit to get acclimated to it. Anybody besides me ever known somebody who got all their identity from work, made a lot of money, and cannot let it go? You shared with me, your dad has made a lot of money. He owns lots of units. He had to almost die multiple times, and you had to push him and actually bring him a buyer for his business for him to even consider letting it go. Doesn't travel, works 7 days a week. Like, I would propose, like what Justin's saying, like, he's not actually living richly. He's poor. He's poor.
He is enslaved to the self-circulating trap that he has built.
Yeah, the hamster wheel.
I just had that conversation with my dad on Tuesday. So, and this, just so you know, this is where we're all going unless we actively decide to go in a different direction, is to be subject to the very thing we're saying we're pursuing, which is financial freedom. Yeah. How many of you have heard the name Giuseppe Zingara? Don't worry. You got to go back 90 years to 1933. So it's February 15th, 1933 in Chicago. Giuseppe Zingara was an Italian immigrant who wanted to attend an outdoor political rally. He's 5 foot tall. Couldn't see a thing. So he finds a chair and he stands up on the chair at this political rally and he opens his trench coat. He pulls out a revolver, shoots it 5 times. He hits and kills the mayor of Chicago at the time, Anton Cermak. But that's not who he was aiming at. He was actually aiming at the gentleman right next to the mayor of Chicago, who at the time was then President-elect Franklin Delano Roosevelt. But when he had grabbed a chair, he had grabbed a wobbly chair. It caused him to misfire his revolver. Had he picked a chair that wasn't wobbly, he likely would have shot and killed FDR. Had FDR been killed, his vice president, John Nance Garner, who was ideologically opposed to FDR's New Deal, would have handled the Great Depression very differently. We might not have made it out of that time as a country. One wobbly chair changed 90 years worth of history for an entire nation. So here's my question to you. What small, seemingly insignificant part of your current financial apparatus could change the financial trajectory of your family positively or negatively? And are you willing to do the work to find out what that is? So let's take questions. I mean, we've been asking, I've appreciated the interaction, but let's dive into some stuff that's top of mind for you guys.
All right. So let's say I have a primary residence, right? Or I'm buying a primary residence. Could I sell it in 2 years to myself, take the $500,000 gain, and then rent it back to myself and continue to live in the primary
Ooh,
residence?
that's a really good question. So the IRS says it has to be an arm's length transaction. So selling it from yourself to a corporation, even if you're the shareholder, meets the arm's length transaction. Off the top of my head, I'd want to spend some more time on it. Off the top of my head, I don't know why you couldn't do that.
Yeah.
Now, the only thing you'd have to be concerned about is potential double taxation, right? Because you're paying after-tax money to rent this place out. Then you're having to go over here and claim it as income. So do the depreciation benefits outweigh, right? We just would want to walk through that.
Got it.
But transactionally and structurally, yes, I think you can.
Second question.
Yeah.
Are you still mentored by Tom Wheelwright? Do you still do their program?
Mhm.
Love it.
Yeah. It's a network of CPAs. So this goes back to what Aaron preaches all the time. He multiplied himself. He realized I, as a CPA, can only take on so many clients. So I'm going to create a network of CPAs that do, think, and structure just like I do. We'll have people come in our front door, and then we'll disperse them to these other CPAs that are an extension of our firm.
Which means you're always up to date.
Always up to date. He has helped me with things that I never knew about that I've then been able to push downstream. And I'm reminded that every time I write him a check. Like, you are an expensive friend, but I'm glad to have you.
You're helpful.
That's right.
How are you?
How you doing, brother? Just your Mr. Rogers look? It's looking clean, brother. It's like Mexican Mr. Rogers. Senor Jose.